the first part of our journey, we're going to be talking about an overview and a terminology sort of section. We're going to give you definitions, talk about the parties that are involved in the surrogacy process. We're going to give you the timelines to kind of anticipate. We're going to give you a very brief introduction into the medical steps and a very brief introduction into the legal steps. And then the second part of this morning's presentation, we're going to talk about some of the major considerations involved. What you want your family to look like, what you want the surrogacy journey to look like. We're going to give you a brief discussion of traditional surrogacy versus gestational surrogacy, which we're going to define for you also. Known versus anonymous egg donors. Some of the medical decisions, and a very brief introduction into the ethical and social decisions. The second part of today, starting at 1 o'clock, we're going to go into pure advice on how to actually pick providers. We're going to tell you more about our website. Our website is an incredible wealth of information for you. How to pick agencies, surrogates, your clinic, what to look for in a donor, and what to look for in an attorney. We're also going to talk about budgeting, a more introductory session about budgeting, the estimated costs, and some cost-saving best practices. And then finally, we're going to talk about the Gay Parenting Assistance Program, the benefits, eligibility for the program, and the process for application. So, let's get into what is surrogacy. Surrogacy we've defined as the act of a woman, altruistic by nature, gestating a child for another individual or couple with the intent to give that child to the intended parents at birth. And we define it as altruistic, while the vast majority of surrogacies are compensated surrogacies, meaning that the carrier is being compensated. I don't think I've ever met a carrier who's just done it for the money. And if you ever meet a prospective surrogate mom who you feel is just doing it for the money, that is a huge red flag. There's always an element of love or a family story about someone having fertility problems that has inspired someone to want to be a surrogate mother. So that's why we've defined it as altruistic in nature. There are two ways of going about surrogacy, and there are two kinds of surrogacy. There's traditional surrogacy and gestational surrogacy. Traditional surrogacy is where your egg donor is also your surrogate mother, so there's a biological relationship between the child and the surrogate mom. That's a minority of the situations. The vast majority are gestational surrogacies where you have a separate egg donor and the surrogate mother does not have a relationship with the child that she's giving birth to. Then we also have two ways of going about it. Independently, where you as the independent parents coordinate the process, arrange for representation for the surrogate mother, arrange for your own legal representation, arrange for the medical aspects, for the retrieval and implantation if you have a gestational carrier and an egg donor. I have an incredible amount of respect for men who can do independent surrogacy. The alternative to that is agency surrogacy, where you're actually hiring an agency to handle all of those details for you, to arrange for representation, to arrange the medical issues. So Ron, I'm going to hand it over to you, and we're going to talk a little bit about the parties that are involved in a gestational surrogacy.
So this is really by way of defining who we're talking about. So we obviously have you guys, often referred to as IPs, and mind you, sometimes you'll be referred as IPs even after you have kids, but it stands for intended parents. We have, of course, you will be interacting with the surrogacy agency who's going to help you match, and screen the surrogate, etc. And we'll talk more about that later. Of course, another important component for all of us here, at least, surrogacy does not always include egg donation, but for us it does. So the egg donors sometimes are referred to abbreviatedly as EDs, not as much in speech as it is in writing. There's a fertility clinic involved, oftentimes, sometimes also an agency that helps find the donors. There's gestational carriers or surrogates are sometimes also abbreviated as GCs. We should also mention, although it's not necessarily directly related just to them, you'll have attorneys involved either as part of the agency or not. She will have an attorney. there will be hopefully a baby, sometimes two, and that is typically not abbreviated. Very briefly, we want to try to give you a sense of what is the timeline. So, you have it in your handout, it's not going to be in the test, but refer to it later. It'll be mentioned, a lot of issues we'll touch upon later. You can go back to this chart and figure out, where do we stand in the process. So, IPs typically start with an agency, sometimes they start with a clinic. As Anthony says, we don't talk about the most average case. Sometimes intended parents work without an agency, or they put together a team of more fragmented services. But sometimes the agency would suggest a clinic, sometimes the clinic would suggest an agency, etc. At some point, again, there's the IP screening. They have different criteria. And then they would start working on finding you a surrogate. Even before they start working on finding an egg donor, those are usually easier to find. There are something's available. Surrogates have to be found, and oftentimes in several months wait. When the surrogate is found, and you show a match sheet, and everybody agrees that there's the meeting and that there's an agreement, and that's when you go down to the blue level, which is the clinic or the clinical side. So that's when there's going to be in-office screening. There will be, once everybody's lined up and everybody's ready, there will be medications and monitoring such that everybody's synchronized, the egg donor, the surrogate, and all leading towards a date when there's going to be finally a retrieval. And the retrieval happens with the egg donor, of course, to get your eggs out. There's going to be fertilization, and then after that, transfer. In the background, of course, there's already some support and coordination at the top level by the agency. Once there is successful transfer, and the pregnancy test shows that, then you will still stay in touch with the fertility clinic for the first trimester, and after that, the surrogate, the gestation carrier will be in touch with our own OB, and that'll be arranged in coordination with you and the fertility doctor. And possibly the agency. Meanwhile, the agency is still helping you coordinate and support you. There will be at some point legal preparations for the birth as the pregnancy progresses, and there will be a birth plan discussed with you, such that everybody knows where and how, and planning is for who, but you at least need to try. And then eventually, hopefully, successful birth. If the first transfer did not succeed, you basically go back 3 steps and continue with the same round, and we'll talk more about that.
So I want to give you a brief introduction into some of the legalities around surrogacy. The first thing that you have to understand about surrogacy, particularly in New York, surrogacy is illegal in New York. Compensated surrogacy is illegal in New York. Currently, there is a ban that only allows for altruistic surrogacy. And there are very limited reimbursements that intended parents can provide for a surrogate mother who gives birth in New York. So surrogacy really is a state-by-state issue. Where your surrogate gives birth is going to determine what laws and what case law applies. So you can work, if you're working with an agency, when they provide a surrogate profile for you, one of the first things that is going to come up is what state the surrogate lives in and what is the state of the law in that state. So you have to find a suitable jurisdiction. My gestational carrier lived on the border of Virginia and North Carolina, and she wanted to give birth in North Carolina because that's where her family, she had given birth at this one very good hospital there. So our surrogacy contract had all of the law for Virginia just in case something happened, and then all of the law for North Carolina. So you're going to see that in a surrogacy contract. The first contract, however, that you're going to be dealing with, if you work with an agency, is your contract with the agency. And this is the one time in the entire process, if you're working with an agency, where you may not be represented by an attorney who's looking out for you. That an agency contract is going to spell out all of the things that they are going to provide for you, what they anticipate the journey is going to look like, but it is going to be drafted in light of in favor of the agency. So if you have any questions about an agency contract when you're drafting it, please don't hesitate to ask them. see, if you want to seek counsel, unfortunately in New York, this is the conundrum in New York. I do the parental establishment attorney to do parental establishment in New York when people come back from having surrogacy in other states. But if somebody came to me and said, can you please look at the surrogacy contract for me? I couldn't do that because I would be in violation of the law here in New York. However, there are attorneys in Connecticut and in New Jersey who can look at that for you. And if you have any questions, you can certainly ask the agency to clarify them and ask for revisions in the agency contract. The second contract that you're going to see is with the surrogate mother. And if you signed up with an agency, they are going to be representing you in the surrogate contract. If you're doing it independently, you have to find someone to draft that surrogacy contract for you and be your representative. That surrogacy contract is incredibly dense. It tries to anticipate, and it should be, it tries to anticipate all of the issues that are going to come up in the surrogacy process. How to deal with medical issues, unforeseen medical issues, what the state of the law is, what would happen if. These are really complicated but incredibly necessary contracts. And again, if you have any questions, at this point, if you're working with an agency, they're going to be representing you in that contract. The surrogate, however, also has to have independent counsel representing her. One of the things that we're going to talk about in the ethical guidelines seminar at 5 o'clock today is how to actually make sure that a surrogate has independent counsel if that counsel is actually being provided or referred by your surrogacy agency, which is often what happens. Surrogacy agencies will have attorneys in the states where the surrogates give birth that they've worked with, and they will have those attorneys represent the surrogate in the surrogate contract. So she has to be represented by counsel in her own state. Sometimes you're also going to see egg donor contracts as well, which depending on what kind of relationship, if you want to have a known egg donor, someone who will possibly be part of your life, the trend really is kind of heading towards known egg donation now, or whether you want to have an anonymous donor, the donor has to be represented by independent counsel, and your agency, if you're working with an agency or you independently, have to find someone to draft the egg donor contract. And then the last aspect, which I think is probably the most important aspect, is establishing the parental rights of the non-biological father once you get back to New York, or wherever your home state is. Many states now offer parentage orders, depending on where your surrogate lives. A parentage order is an order that usually terminates the rights of the gestational carrier, sometimes also the rights of her husband, sometimes also the rights of the egg donor and her husband if she has one, and names the biological father, or in some states the biological father and the non-biological father, as the legal parents. Here in New York, we don't have a strategy to have a parentage order. There is, I think for 3 years now, the Child Parent Security Act has been installed in committee in Albany. This act would legalize surrogacy in New York, and it would also establish parentage orders in New York. It would make our jobs a lot easier, and it would make your lives a lot easier. Unfortunately, we're working to get that moving forward. The Empire State Pride Agenda is working to move that forward also. But the question is, how do you establish that foolproof relationship? And in New York right now, that's through second parent adoption, or if you're married to the non-biological partner, then it's step-parent adoption. And that's a process in New York that is tried and true. Once you have an adoption order, no one can challenge it, and your rights are secured, not only in the United States, but around the world. So we're going to move into the second section of the first part, which is questions that you want to ask yourself before you start the journey. And the first one is, can you do it without an agency? Can you do it independently? If you want to try to do this independently, get good spreadsheet software. You have to find your surrogate by yourself. There are ways of doing that. Surromoms online, friends who used surrogates before. There are different websites that you can go to that you can try to find your own surrogate. But you also have to identify and hire your own professionals. And in New York, that probably is going to mean you're going to have to go to Connecticut or New Jersey to get someone to draft your surrogacy contract for you, because New York attorneys can't do that. You have to find a clinic for the medical screening for the IVF or the IUI. IVF is in vitro fertilization. That's where they take a fertilized egg and implant it. IUI is intrauterine insemination, and that is used if you have a traditional surrogate where sperm is injected directly into the uterus to facilitate pregnancy. You're going to need to find an agency and a clinic for donor matching, egg donor matching if you're using an egg donor. You have to find an attorney to draft the surrogate's contract, and you have to find an attorney to represent the surrogate in that contract. And lastly, finding an attorney to create parental establishment for the non-biological parent. And the last element of this process, which I think Greg is going to speak a little bit more to, is providing psychosocial screening and support, especially for the surrogate mom, and also for you. When you work with an agency, many agencies will have a social worker dedicated to you and a social worker dedicated to the surrogate mother. And when Shannon, our surrogate, got pregnant, she had a medical issue that was a little bit scary, and we worked through it through our social workers and with ourselves. And we were very grateful to have social workers representing us at that point, because you don't know what's going to happen. But if you do it independently, if you can find someone who will serve as counsel, psychological counsel certainly for your surrogate mom and possibly her family, but also for you, it's a critical part not to overlook. If you are thinking about using an agency, the other side of this is the agency is going to screen donors and surrogates. They're going to match you, and they are going to provide that support. Ask the providers in the expo what levels of support they offer to you, because they usually all have someone on staff specifically for this. They will, again, act as a liaison between you and the surrogate if an issue arises where you need some kind of liaison. They're going to work with the clinic to coordinate the parties, and George is going to talk about the medical coordination of egg donors and surrogate moms. They're going to draft and secure representation for the surrogate. They're going to draft the surrogate contract. And they will either handle themselves or they will arrange to handle the parental establishment hearing or the adoption for the non-biological parent at the end of the journey. So that's just an idea to sort of plant. If you're thinking about doing this on your own, these are the issues that you want to look at. I'm going to hand it over to Greg now, and Greg is going to talk a little bit about traditional surrogacy versus gestational surrogacy.
Hello, good morning. My name is Greg Payton, and I'm a gay dad of 2 kids, as well as a clinical psychologist here in the city in private practice. And as you can already see from kind of the initial presentation, there are lots of decision points along this way. And both as a dad and as a psychologist, I can say that these decisions have a lot of kind of weight to them. Perhaps one of the first decisions you'll make after you decide whether you want to go through an agency or whether you want to work independently is this question of, do you want to take the path of a traditional surrogacy or do you want to take the path of a gestational surrogacy? As you can see, just from the numbers that we've put up here, traditional surrogacy is far less common, and that is because of sort of some of the evolution of both medical and legal developments over time. Just a couple features of traditional versus gestational that distinguish these two very different paths. The first is that with the traditional surrogacy process, you are working with a surrogate who's also the bio mom, right? So she is the egg donor in that case as well. And so that process medically looks very different as well as legally. The first probably consideration is that there maybe medically some different features of this. For instance, artificial insemination is going to be the means of developing a pregnancy, but that often takes more time or more tries. It's typically less successful than a gestational process. Many people choose traditional because it may be a less expensive option. And so that's often a decision factor. And some folks, really prefer to have a known genetic donor or to have some kind of close connection with both the surrogate and the bio mom and kind of want to have that relationship develop. Gestational surrogacies, by comparison, are much, much more common. And in this case, the surrogate and the egg donor are play separate roles. One is contributing the egg, and one is playing the role of the surrogate. This often is seen by many people who go through this process as a great benefit, because maybe the roles are more kind of defined and contained, but also maybe because from this perspective of, if the surrogate is not biologically connected to the child, maybe there is a little bit more distance emotionally. This is often considered the safer legal route, and in fact, when my husband and I were going through this process, this was kind of the only thing that was recommended to us, was gestational. And certainly that was just our experience, and you may kind of choose a different path, but the primary reason, I think, why a lot of people do choose gestational is because legally it's just a lot more sound. And again, there's kind of less ambiguity about the role of the surrogate, because there isn't that biological connection. But in addition to kind of whether you want to choose gestational or traditional surrogacy, there are also other factors to consider within these different paths. And one is the location of the potential surrogate and egg donor. I would also add, whether you want a known donor for either process or an anonymous donor. That's not an option for the traditional, but with gestational, you could also know the donor in some cases. Is the surrogate insured, and how does that kind of affect the decision process? And then also the extent to which the surrogate is experienced or inexperienced with being a surrogate. And now I'm going to turn this over to George, who's going to speak more about kind of some of the medical choices.